In 1965, an off-Broadway play ended up premiering that was written by a man called Douglas Turner Ward that was called The Day of Absence. Now, the basic premise of this play is that the black residents of a particular area that have faced discrimination for years, yet work in key positions, key jobs, end up disappearing. They don't show up. And it is about the reaction to the largely discriminatory white population to those people leaving, to them not being there, because in reality, even though they weren't working the top jobs or anything like that, these people worked in key roles that made people's day-to-day lives function. And the idea, the premise behind this play was that, hey, you know what? Think about the way that you're treating people just based on the color of their skin. Fast forward to 2024, and we're in a situation where Baton Rouge is dealing with the breakup of the largely white part of their city, this unincorporated territory that was weirdly under their jurisdiction, and the formation of a new municipality called St. George. Now, this absence is going to be absolutely devastating because the white residents of the newly formed St. George made up the bulk of the tax revenue for Baton Rouge, and of course, this is leading to a lot of problems in the area because after winning their right to form their own municipality, the prospects for Baton Rouge look absolutely devastating. And you would think that all these different black activists who talked about how white people aren't wanted, white people aren't needed, white people just ruin everything with their evil white racism would realize the error of their ways. But instead, what we're seeing across these black activists is a bunch of accusations of racism, a bunch of coping and dealing with the fact that they got exactly what they've been asking for a very long time, and of course, allegations of racism and how they're sabotaging the black community while simultaneously saying that they don't need the white residents because the black people would be way better off without the white people. What a stunning reversal of the premise of this play. Now, we're going to get into this, we're going to get into the latest updates, but before we do, I want to say thank you to everybody who signed up over at actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money, okay?
Your support is greatly appreciated.
So, black people in Baton Rouge, Louisiana are going to be a lot safer, and I'm going to tell you why. So, this particular story actually started in 2012, where wealthy white people wanted to have a separate school district for their children. Well, that was not successful, and in 2019, they got a ballot measure to try to separate the school district, but that didn't work. And so somebody came up with the bright idea of, well, why don't we just get a whole new town? We'll separate from the rest of Baton Rouge. And so recently, a Louisiana Supreme Court decided, well, you know what? We're going to acquiesce your demands. And in fact, it said it was a 4-3 decision.
So first of all, I got to give credit where credit is due to the woman over at this African Diaspora channel because her summary of these events are reasonably accurate. Now, there is additional context that I would like to add, which is the fact that Baton Rouge actually has the worst school districts in all of the state of Louisiana. So, wanting to form your own school district while often being painted by people in the mainstream media as evil white racism triggered by these evil white racists, in reality and actuality, is a response to the poorest performing school district in the state of Louisiana. And by the way, if you look at Louisiana's education ratings, that is a low bar to be the worst in all of those different areas of Louisiana. So they were denied the right in order to form this school district. And then this plan ended up getting concocted where they decided, you know what, if they're not going to let us govern ourselves, even in terms of a school district, even though we have this region, when we have the worst school districts in this particular area, the teachers unions have that big of a grip on the Baton Rouge City Council, then we're going to decide to form our own municipality. And this ended up triggering a years-long legal battle that made it almost impossible to get it on the ballot. But in 2019, eventually, when they were able to succeed, the majority of residents of the newly formed St. George voted for independence, voted to form their own municipality, which of course triggered a lengthy 5-year-long court battle that, as we talked about in our previous video, ended up resulting in a 4-3 ruling that sided with St. St. George's ability to form their own municipality, and all of a sudden, people started freaking out. Now, I do want to give a genuine, respectful exemption to the head of the NAACP in this particular area, because although he was upset about this, although he worried about losing a huge portion of the tax base, he did say, you know what, this is a democracy, these people have the right to vote how they want. I'm sad that they voted to leave, but they have every right to do so. So at least the local NAACP is on the right side of this issue, despite the fact that they disagree in terms of whether or not you should be able to form your own little city or own little town. However, the rest of these black activists not having it. They want to call these white people evil, white, and racist because of this new town will be in and around 70% white. By the way, they'll have 18% black people in this particular area, and there's nothing to stop anybody from Baton Rouge proper from moving into St. George. It's not like they're building a wall around it, but again, rather than have some reflection about how they wanted to build their own successful school district, and you ended up denying them that ability, and then they ended up winning a legal battle against you, there's a lot of hatred and anger and frustration, and again, talking out of both sides of your mouth, saying that black people will be more successful in Baton Rouge proper, but also the white people are sabotaging and destroying Baton Rouge proper. So when they fail, that is not on them. It's on the evil white racists who are now quite literally no longer involved in the governing of Baton Rouge.
Now, the NAACP has said this: the population of Old Jefferson, Shenandoah, and Enniswold, all East Baton Rouge Parish neighborhoods, which will be included in St. George, are at least 55% white, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. The NAACP Baton Rouge branch expressed concern over potential segregation and the unequal distribution of parish resources, as well as consequences for Baton Rouge's education system.
Now, that particular person at the NAACP was actually quite upset because the bare minimum amount of whites in any of these given neighborhoods is 55%, and he's concerned about the unequal distribution of resources, but again, those are these people's resources. This neighborhood is being carved off. The idea that you're losing out because they're no longer sharing their tax dollars with you is absurd in every possible way. Again, you probably should have treated them better, governed them better, and maybe they wouldn't have wanted to leave, but you decided that you were going to pull the trigger on this, and now you have to deal with the consequences of those actions.
So they're basically saying that the white people with the money, they're leaving, and the good resources that were given to all of them will probably go with them. And so I'm saying this: while that sounds like a horrible thing, as I said in the beginning, I think black people are going to be a lot safer because, for one, when those white folks are off to themselves, then they're off to themselves, right? And they can go do what they need to do and don't worry about the rest of us.
So one of the issues of why these people are deciding that they want to leave Baton Rouge proper is also due to the crime that they have to deal with in Baton Rouge proper. But for this woman to say that these white people leaving will somehow make black people safer flies in the face of all crime statistics ever in the history of ever. It's one of the most absurd statements humanly possible, and it's kind of crazy that she says something that asinine and ridiculous because she actually follows it up with a statement that I kind of agree with, and I'm gonna give her credit where credit is due in that regard after making fun of the absolute absurdity of her denial of reality of who's actually committing the crimes in Baton Rouge.
Now, as far as saying, well, those resources will probably go to them, unfortunately, that is probably true. But see, that's another case as to why we as black people need to, as Marcus Garvey told us so many years ago, up you mighty nation, accomplish what you will. As the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, do for self. Right? Now, I'm not saying we don't get our reparations. We still want our reparations, but we need to stop depending on everybody else. And I always say this too, do you, especially in this day and age, do you want your children going to school with them? They're not teaching your children, right?
So yeah, obviously you could tell that this woman definitely 100% not a fan of white people, doesn't want them there, but again, is upset that white people are leaving this area because they're taking their resources, but also wants to make the case that the black areas are going to be better off. And she also makes the case for the black community actually becoming a community in this particular area, working together in order to build up their wealth. And this is actually the one part of this whole segment that I 100% agree with. And she even references how during discrimination, during Jim Crow, black people were actually forced to do this. And if you look at some of the numbers and the indicators from the black communities across this country during that period of time, they were in fact improving themselves. Their crime rates were in fact dropping. And all of these different positive outcomes were happening not because of discrimination, but because of the response to discrimination. And if you think about it, this makes a lot of sense. Koreans are quite successful in the United States of America. Jewish people are successful in the United States of America. Armenians, a bunch of other groups, Indians, for example, happen to have been successful throughout this country's history. Japanese people, I could go on forever, honestly. Caribbean black people. And that is because they have a culture that has an in-group preference. They end up working together and favoring members of that in-group. And that builds a community, and that community creates high social trust, and within that high social trust, the cost of business, the cost of prospering ends up going down. This is something that actually I agree that black people should work together towards if they want to be more successful as a group, and I think it is much better than trying to get the government to give money from the taxpayers in order to pay for these projects or these universities or these whatever, because in reality, things that you build and achieve yourself are far more productive than what you get in terms of handouts from the government. So in this one regard, throughout this whole crazy anti-white rant, she actually struck gold. Broken clocks are in fact right twice a day. However, this is not the entree. This is the appetizer, because Roland Martin is also angry about this, and he is completely unhinged throughout the whole course of his segment, and that's what I want to jump into.
2024, guess what? In Louisiana, the state Supreme Court there is allowing a largely white community to break apart and separate from the city of Baton Rouge to create their own city. This has been a 6-year effort by folks there. On Friday, the Supreme Court granted the formation of the predominantly white city of St. George.
So right off the bat, I have to say Roland Martin, Mr. Research Genius, the same absolute buffoon that bought that the Tiffany A. Henyard Cares Foundation has nothing to do with Tiffany A. Henyard, and we covered that, by the way, in our Super Mayor video, is completely wrong. It has not been a 6-year fight in order to get St. George created. In fact, the woman over at the African Diaspora channel had this more accurate. She said that it's been since 2012 when they tried to form the school district. Then it took years to get this on the ballot. It got on the ballot and ended up passing in 2019. And then there was a 5-year court battle in order to win this in the Supreme Court. So, of course, Roland Martin, the absolute doof, completely wrong about everything. Also, I want to take note of this fact. Roland Martin is wearing a shirt right now of an exclusively black fraternity. That's what he decided to wear in a video where he complains about the white people leaving because separating yourselves is evil, white, and racist and absolutely horrible, but also Roland Martin loves his black fraternity that separates themselves. Now again, I'm not against people forming these groups or organizations based on a common ethnic origin or anything like that. That being said, it's funny that he's going to come out against this. He's going to be against this separation, not give you any of the context while he's wearing that shirt.
On Friday, the Supreme Court granted the formation of the predominantly white city of St. George, which will be separate from Baton Rouge. The ruling is sparking concerns about segregation.
Now, they say the ruling is sparking concerns about segregation, but again, while they're forming a new municipality, there is nothing that says in said new municipality that black people can't move into these neighborhoods or anything like that. It's not like they separated this off, Avatar Kyoshi style, formed their own island, and then said no black people are allowed.
You made clear, Gary, that this was a very organized effort by a handful of people with a lot of money to achieve the creation of their own city. Walk folks through how this happened.
So, Roland, we have a man named Norman Browning who organizes a group of about 10 people that decide they want a new school district because they don't want their kids to go to the schools of Baton Rouge.
So right off the top, we get into the conspiracy theorizing. So let's be clear about this. The majority of the people who turned out for this election, which by the way, it was not all the voting people that were there, came out and voted in favor of forming St. George. So the idea that, oh, this was one man teamed up with 10 whites in order to form their own school district, and it's such evil white racism. Again, I will point out that Baton Rouge's schools are the worst in the state of Louisiana. You could have just allowed these people to form a school district. It is not unusual for a section of town that, by the way, is about 80,000 people in a city that, by the way, again, is about 200,000 people to have at least one of their own school districts, but they said no. And then it's like, oh, then they got together and decided to separate off, and I'm really upset about this. But I'm also going to talk incredibly, excruciatingly slow about how upset I'm about this so that you get angry listening to me.
Keep in mind, Baton Rouge is the city that had the longest desegregation lawsuit in America. We didn't finish that lawsuit until the 90s.
Now, he also sprinkles in this reference to a discrimination lawsuit that didn't conclude until the 90s, and I just want to say, for everybody out there in the audience, everyone who might be listening, who the hell cares? What does this have to do with them being able to form their own municipality?
And so when you look at the conversation around people wanting a new school district, these are people who ultimately don't want their kids to go to school with black kids. Currently, the school district in Baton Rouge is 80% black, even though the city is 56% black. So white parents in Baton Rouge right now, for the most part, do not send their kids to public schools in Baton Rouge. As a result of not getting that school district, these folks then decided to try to start a city.
So first of all, I think this needs to be pointed out for everybody in the audience because this context isn't given. This guy might have even went to the Baton Rouge public school system, so maybe he doesn't understand this. But black people on average are younger than white people on average in the United States of America. So what this means is that even if 55% of a population happens to be black and the other 45%, which by the way, this is not true, there's other minorities in there, happen to be white, and you end up in a scenario where there are more black kids in school than their population versus white kids, that should surprise absolutely no one because the median age, the average age of white people is older than the average age of black people. So there would actually be more people in the younger category, in the kids category. So a misrepresentation in terms of when you're comparing it to the general population is to be expected just because black people are disproportionately younger. On top of that, to the extent that these white parents, these white families are pulling their kids out of these public schools due to the fact that they're being run so terribly, that should be a signal to the governing bodies of Baton Rouge that maybe you're not doing enough to satisfy your customer base, the people who are paying for everyone's education because they're a huge percentage of the tax base, and maybe change, maybe listen to their suggestions, maybe allow them to form their own school board. But instead, you didn't want to do that, and now all of a sudden you want to bitch and moan about them setting up their own municipality.
The vote of 17,000 now impacts 400,000 people who live in East Baton Rouge Parish because of the general fund that's $1 billion of city parish money. 300 million of that is not dedicated. And they're going to take away $48 million of resources from the general fund in order to create this new municipality. So I don't really care if they go off and segregate themselves, but I do care that we've paid into the fortunes of that portion of town for the last 50 years. And to say that you're going to start a new community and then we owe you money for that community, well, we've been paying a whole lot for a long time and we want our portion to be paid for if you're going to get it.
So first of all, this guy 100% does care. Secondly, I will point out that this portion of Baton Rouge, the city, not Baton Rouge East Parish, is paying the overwhelming majority of the taxes in the city of Baton Rouge. So this general fund, that's $1 billion, and this $300 million undedicated, a huge portion of that disproportionately comes from these residents. And from what I was looking into, it seems like all they're asking for is the amount of money that they contributed to this undedicated fund since 2019, since they voted to separate off before they were bogged down in lawsuits. That's all that they want, but this guy has a problem with it because not allowing these people to get their own money to be taxed basically without representation on how it's spent is what he's going for. So he's being insanely dishonest right here, crying about this because he's upset that the tax base is leaving. Well, sad day for you. You didn't treat them with any respect. You're still not treating them with any respect. And now, again, we have you talking out of both sides of your mouth about how you don't need these people. You don't care if they form their own city, but they can't take their own money with them.
But I do care that we've paid into the fortunes of that portion of town for the last 50 years. And to say that you're going to start a new community and then we owe you money for that community, well, we've been paying a whole lot for a long time, and we want our portion to be paid for if you're going to get it.
So spoiler alert, when this guy's talking about they, he's talking about black people in the Baton Rouge area. And to be clear, they have not been paying a whole lot. You can look at all these different metrics, all this different analytics. What you'll find out is that in terms of net taxpayers, you're far more likely to be one if you're a white American than if you're a black American. And that holds true in Baton Rouge, which again is not a wealthy city overall. So no, you haven't been paying a whole lot. You haven't been contributing a whole lot. Again, if you would have gave them a school district 12 years ago, you wouldn't be in this situation. Now you're trying to rob them on the way out, which is absolutely disgusting in every possible way. And of course, you're still talking out of both sides of your mouth.
What's interesting here, you also mentioned that you have a black mayor in Baton Rouge, and it's not like, Baton Rouge ain't Atlanta. It's not like there have been black mayors for the last 30 plus years.
No, she is the second black mayor of Baton Rouge. Kip Holden was the first black mayor of Baton Rouge. He was elected in 2004, took office in 2005. So when you put that into perspective, black folks have only been in leadership in this city for under 20 years, okay?
Kind of got to laugh about this because they're like, listen, it's not like they've had black mayors for the past 30 years like Atlanta. It's totally different in this situation. They've only had a black mayor since 2004, which is 20 years. Which is pretty long. So presumably if they've had a black mayor for the last 30 years, Roland Martin would have said, it's not like, they had black mayors since for 40 years. It's just been 38.5 years. I mean, come on. What are we talking about? And again, why are you bringing up the race of the mayor? Other than the fact that the mayor was the one who stupidly decided to engage in this losing lawsuit and ultimately ended up losing a huge portion of her tax base, thus making her one of the most buffoonish mayors in the history of this country.
So to tell us that the woes or the condition of this city are all the fault of the black leadership, and let's be clear, Roland, the council is majority white, majority conservative in Baton Rouge. It's a 12-member council. 7 white conservatives serve on the Metro Council here in Baton Rouge, and they approve or disapprove of all of the plans of the mayor. And so when we talk about the progress of a community, we have to talk about the inequities and the tale of two cities that have existed for long before Sharon Weston Broome was the mayor of Baton Rouge.
I don't recall anyone, and I mean anyone, on the side of St. George, the new municipality, saying that the fault of Baton Rouge relies solely on black leadership. That's just made up by him. That's something that he is projecting out into the world, likely because he feels insecure about it. Roland Martin brought it up. Likely he feels insecure about it. But that was not stated or said by anyone in the leadership pushing for the new municipality of St. George. They just brought that up out of nowhere. And they're going to make the case that, it's actually the 7 conservatives that are doing this, and that's the real problem.
We have to talk about how we've invested in South Baton Rouge, the portion of town that is segregating themselves away, and to the demise of North Baton Rouge, actually. And so if we don't have honest conversations about how we got here, then we can't have an honest conversation about how we move forward. And the truth is, when people talk about this unity and why do we talk about race, this is why we talk about race, because people are literally segregating their children, segregating the city, and then taking away resources from our community.
So again, this is where we get into absurd territory. So right now, he's trying to make the case that the wealthy white areas, which is South Baton Rouge, now St. George, are actually the leeches. These are actually the people who are sucking up all the tax money from northern Baton Rouge, which happens to be disproportionately black. And honestly, we would be better off if they separate, which is an interesting perspective to have to put forward to talk about how the white conservatives are ruining absolutely everything in Baton Rouge, and they're just leeching off of everything that the blacks are building, but you're against them leaving. You're upset about it. You're mad about it. You're angry about it. So obviously what's going on is you're lying. You're trying to save face, and it's embarrassing.
Even prove that they were going to pay for the services of the city. They have proposed that it's going to cost them $47 million to run a city of 80,000 people, and they're going to privatize every aspect of the services of the city. They don't even have a plan for policing, Roland. They plan to just take the sheriff's department and just give them $4 million and hope that covers the bill.
So one of the funny things that I saw throughout the course of this segment is the grand investment that he's talking about. Something that they did for this white area of South Baton Rouge was put an exit on the highway for that particular area. Having an exit so that they can get off the highway. Wow, what a great use of the majority of the tax dollars in Baton Rouge, which was to pay for this one exit for the whites. I definitely buy into the fact that the black residents of the city of Baton Rouge are just subsidizing all of this, and it's crazy. But what makes me laugh even more is he starts complaining about how the residents of South Baton Rouge can't pay for their government services. They're not going to be able to handle it. They're saying they're going to privatize a bunch of these services, and that's not going to work. So they haven't proven that they can even govern themselves. So obviously they're going to collapse into nothingness because they have no idea how to run a municipality. They have no idea how to run a town, how to run a city. Well, again, if this is true, if you're the ones that are carrying the weight for the southern Baton Rouge area, which is largely white, largely wealthy, if you're the ones who are putting the money in and they can't even run any government, they can't even do any government services without you, then South Baton Rouge, which is now St. George, will collapse, and in a few years they'll come begging you to save them. They'll say, oh my God, what could we do without you, as you're building a utopia in North Baton Rouge, which is going to have the best school districts in the history of the country, obviously, because you're the tax dollars, you're the ones who build everything, they're the leeches. But we all know that that's not true. We all understand that that's nonsense in every possible way. Why would you be opposed to this if it wasn't going to have a negative impact on you? Why would the mayor fight this for 5 years? Why are they pushing for a rehearing of these particular circumstances? Why are you fighting for them not being able to get a small portion of what they've contributed to the Baton Rouge Parish Fund? What is going on right here? Sounds like you're lying.
They don't even have a plan for policing, Roland. They plan to just take the sheriff's department and just give them $4 million and hope that that covers the bill.
And my favorite part right there is they don't even have a plan for policing. They just want to give the sheriff's department $4 million and hope that that covers the bill. Again, we now have black activists, defund the police type of people, saying that this white area, the leeches in the white area that couldn't get on without all the black people in North Baton Rouge, don't have a plan for policing. They just want to delegate $4 million to the sheriff's department and hope that covers it. Wow, what a bunch of evil white racists. And what's funny about this is when you actually cut to the people who won this case, who want to form a government, they're excited. They're saying, hey, bring your ideas, innovate. Let's imagine a new, better state that's not bogged down with all the red tape and all the decades, and honestly, in some of these cases, centuries of municipal laws stacking on top of each other.
Whether you were for St. George or you were against St. George, now is your opportunity, a historic opportunity to create a city from the beginning, from the ground up. It's your ideas, it's your policies, it's your way of life, and now you can come together and put those out there and have someone accountable to you. No longer accountable to some people off in the city of Baton Rouge or somewhere else in the parish. No, they're going to be accountable to you, your neighbors, your friends, and your coworkers.
So they're all excited and optimistic. This guy's super pessimistic. He doesn't want to give them a dime of their own money, by the way, that they contributed, is calling them leeches, is talking about this grand highway exit that, of course, was all the money in Baton Rouge given to them, and all these different other various things. But in reality, what we're seeing right here is that he can't deal with the absence of white people. He got his wish, and it was a thing that completely backfired in his face. And every single one of these black activists are going to eat crow when in 10 years, South Baton Rouge, now St. George, is doing significantly better. And every single metric in North Baton Rouge, which will be current Baton Rouge, is getting significantly worse. You did this to yourselves. You said that they couldn't have a school district 12 years ago. They decided to form their own government. And now you have to live with the consequences of that. So go ahead, do your appeal, ask the court to rehear it, cry about it, do all those different things, cry racism. But in reality, you said that this is what you wanted. You got what you wanted, so shut up. Now, that's all I really have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on the social medias, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about people crying about whites leaving. Till next time.